high definition. Local, part of your community. This is KSN, local news at 10.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Lapka. Two people suffer minor injuries after a shooting in Joplin this afternoon. Shortly after 2 this afternoon, Joplin police responded to shots fired near 17th Street and Kansas Avenue. Witnesses say they saw two vehicles leaving Par Hill Park, and that's when the shooting began. Two people were grazed by the bullets. One person was hit in the ankle, and the other was hit in the shoulder. The witness who was hit in the shoulder recalls what happens exclusively for our cameras. For safety purposes, she does not want to share her identity.
Park towards 15th in Kansas, more shots were fired back towards the park area, grazing my shirt, and my kids were outside, so I came running back to put my kids inside.
At this time, we believe that there were multiple people involved firing weapons here. As far as the exact number of people, at this time, I don't know.
At this time, JPD does not know how many shooters were involved, although two people were taken into custody but were later released. Police are searching for a third. The incident spans multiple city blocks. Joplin police are still investigating. A recent string of burglaries in Coffeyville have police urging residents to be vigilant in protecting their property. Police say that officers spent most of their Saturday morning investigating several vehicle burglaries that took place on the west side of the city, more specifically from Wilshire to Centennial. This has prompted the department to put out a reminder to lock all doors at night. They are also asking for help in finding the person or persons responsible for the theft. So if anyone has cameras in that area, they ask you please to review them from Friday night. If you see anything suspicious, please save it and contact the police department. You should also contact them if you believe you have been a victim of theft. They can be reached at 620-252-6160. The Cherokee County Sheriff's Office and the Galena Police Department are teaming up to help take back drugs in Kansas. Saturday the 28th from 10 in the morning until noon, the departments will be collecting drugs at different locations. Residents can drop off their unwanted drugs off at 3 different locations: the Apple Market in Columbus, Marvin's IGA in Baxter Springs, or Galena City Hall. Last April, Americans turned in 900,000 pounds of prescription drugs at almost 5,500 sites operated by the DEA. Congress could be making some changes to law affecting hunters and other sportsmen. Among the items, the Sportsmen's Heritage and Recreational Enhancement, or SHARE Act, would change how firearm suppressors are regulated. If passed into law, the bill would require anyone wanting to purchase a suppressor to go through the same background check process required to purchase a rifle or other long gun. Currently, suppressors go through a separate background check process as part of the National Firearms Act. The bill wouldn't make them legal in any state that prohibits them, though. The bill is still being worked on by the House Committee on Natural Resources. President Trump has indicated he would sign it if passed into law. Even as Congress debates their future, many people are becoming more curious about how suppressors work. Tonight, KSN's Jeremiah Cook talks to a local firearms expert and shows us how they work and why calling them a silencer may not be accurate.
Garrett Dykes says he's fired a gun several times, but today will be a first for him.
I've never fired a suppressed weapon.
In fact, he says his only knowledge of how they sound comes from the silver screen.
Lots of movies.
So he's come to Black Rain Ordnance in Neosho, and the experts have set him up with a suppressed rifle.
I honestly don't know what to expect as of right now.
Garrett may not realize it, but the technology behind this suppressor dates back more than a century. Suppressors were invented by Hiram Maxim, son of the inventor of the portable machine gun in the early 20th century, and they're closely tied to another product most of us are familiar with.
Essentially what we're talking about is a redesigned car muffler.
Jason Wilkins with Black Rain Ordnance says there are several ways a suppressor can attach to a rifle. For example, they can be thread mounted,
where you just take it and thread it directly onto the barrel.
Wilkins says suppressors work by allowing the gases produced by firing a round to expand.
It's basically just a step down in pressure and then a continuous step down in pressure until it's out into the atmosphere.
And they're not necessarily anything like Hollywood has portrayed them.
The reality is it still sounds like a gunshot. It just sounds like a gunshot that's not going to be deafening.
Wilkins says suppressors are regulated by the National Firearms Act of 1934, which means that before you can buy one, there are some steps to take, including a background check, submitting fingerprints, and paying a $200 tax on top of the actual purchase price. And that background check could take as long as a year to come back. But despite that, they're more widely available than you might think.
In most states, including Missouri, you can actually buy a suppressor if you're just a regular Joe. You just have to go through the proper steps.
Meanwhile, back at the firing range, Garrett is getting ready to fire his first suppressed rifle. Before he fired the rifle, Garrett told me he wasn't sure about buying a suppressor because of the price. But afterwards,
It's well worth the money, I think. I'd say it's well worth the money.
in Neosho, Jeremiah Cook, KSN, Local News.
Wilkins says if you still have questions about how suppressors work, feel free to give them a call at Black Rain Ordnance or drop by their store just north of Neosho on I-49. We're still a few weeks away from pre-filing date for next year's legislative session in Missouri, but lawmakers already have an idea of what topics will likely be up for discussion. State Representative Charlie Davis says one item that will be up for discussion is a bill he's filing that would ensure registered sex offenders can't live within 1,000 feet of the property line of a school or daycare. Currently, they can't be within 1,000 feet of the building, regardless of where the property line is located. Davis says he'll also be filing several bills from last year that didn't make it across the finish line, like adding vehicles owned and operated by the Civil Support Team of the Missouri National Guard to be defined as emergency vehicles when being used for operations involving hazardous materials. Meanwhile, Kansas State Senator Richard Hildebrand says he expects education funding to be one of the biggest priorities of next year's legislative session in the Sunflower State. Earlier this year, the state Supreme Court struck down education funding. Hildebrand says it's still too early to know for sure what measures the legislature would consider, but a constitutional amendment to fix the funding issues is a possibility. He says there might also be a legislation filed to expand Medicaid in Kansas. Webb City morning commuters may have to take a different route to work tomorrow. Crews will be repairing a leak in the water main line along Daughtry Street in Webb City. A portion of Daughtry Street will be closed between Main Street and Webb Street. Crews will start work tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and are expected to finish by 3 p.m. Drivers should be aware of the work and drive slowly around the area. Coming up, Jeremiah Keck has all the weather details you need to start your work week, and one restaurant is looking to raise awareness for funding for one local organization.